Parl, thanks for joining me today. Appreciate having you on stage. What we want to do today is kind of discuss how Nuvia implemented a solution with Zoho. Nuvia uses over 20 Zoho applications, although we're going to mainly focus on the CRM. And before we get started, wanted to introduce Nuvia. Nuvia is a dental implant company, and they have tons of locations around the U.S. and they're expanding. And they were met with some challenges as they scaled their business, and that's where Zoho CRM and some of the Zoho apps were able to solve some of these unique challenges. Before we get into that, Parl, tell me a little bit more about Nuvia. One of the things that I love about your company is very innovative, right? You have a unique way of uh, implementing these implants for a customer, and the speed and efficiency in which you guys do that is what really makes you stand out. So if one day I lose all of my teeth, you now know why I would go to Parl in order to get my implants. So Parl, tell me a little bit about Nuvia.
We're able to do a 24-hour turnaround on implants, which is kind of unheard of in the industry. To be able to go in, have your surgery done, and come in 24 hours later and actually get your implanted new smile in. We call it smiles here because that's really what it's all about. We only do half or full mouth. We don't do single teeth or anything like that. So it's a very specialized process. And the reason why we're able to do that is because we build a lab basically in the same vicinity in the community right next to the practice. So they're able to actually produce the implants and get them immediately back to the practice within 24 hours, and it's a pretty impressive process.
Yeah, that's excellent. So imagine having no teeth, and in just 24 hours, you have teeth again. And yeah, like I said, that's for me. If I ever lose my teeth, I know on Tuesday I lose my teeth, on Thursday I have new teeth. That's
Right.
awesome.
It
Yeah,
could also be Friday, but whatever, you
yeah,
know.
no, that's great. Uh, you have a very unique title, Chief Nerd. So you figured out a way to get into the C-suite, which that's awesome. How did you come up with this title? What does that mean? How are you involved with Zoho at Nuvia?
Well, I'm a developer by trade for the last over 30 years. And so I've always been nerdy at heart. I've not always had the title of nerd. People just knew because I used to have big, giant glasses. And then I got LASIK surgery, and then people thought I was normal. And so I had to basically give myself a title to make sure people understood who I still really was at heart. So the company, when they hired me, didn't give me a title, and so I'm self-titled chief nerd,
Self-titled.
and they went with it.
Absolutely, thank you. So, as you heard from Parl, he's a developer. So, from his point of view, he knows that software solutions can automate and solve a lot of problems at the business. Now, when Parl joined, Nuvia was already what I consider in the AZ era after Zoho, but there was a time, BZ, before Zoho. He joined after, but he does know a little bit about how they even were able to find Zoho, implement Zoho. So I'm going to take you all the way back to that BZ era. Okay. What did you hear about when you joined the company? What was the initial problem they were trying to solve? And when you have a business, there's always a series of different issues, but there are some issues that take priority. And so when you are approaching any of your processes, kind of think about, okay, I have 6, 7 problems to solve. Which one is the most critical? Let's start there. So can you describe to me what was that core problem statement for y'all?
Okay. At a certain point of growth, I mean, in the very beginning, they had 2 or 3 locations. Everything was sort of manageable. As soon as they got 10, 20 locations, it became rapidly obvious that things were really becoming unmanageable because everything was sort of an autonomous process. And so it was the CEO and the upper management team that were like, we've got to figure out how to start centralizing something so that we have some level of control over what's happening in all these different locations. And so it was almost more of an emotional reaction because everything felt broken because nothing was central, or everybody had their own process in a Google sheet, or right, it was just a ton of one-offs, a ton of outliers, nothing central about it, and trying to collect data, took an act of God or Congress just to get data into a central enough location to make sense of it. And so it became immediately obvious that they needed something. The CEO himself started tinkering around with Salesforce,
Okay.
um, but he uses a buddy of mine who's also a great nerd who helps him install all the technology in their locations, and came to him and convinced him that Salesforce was not a good approach and not cost effective, which is an easy sell once you understand it, and convinced him to use Zoho because that would be a great way to centralize everything, keep everything
Yep.
cost productive or cost effective, and then be able to build on that. And so that was the impetus behind that whole decision.
Absolutely. So, centralizing a process or standardizing a process is key to a business if you want efficiency. And then when you look for software, there's so many solutions on the market, right? So you start googling, you come across a lot of other vendors, and I like what you kind of pointed out. What drew you to Zoho was the value, right? So and when you look at value, you're looking at time to value, right? You're looking at the cost of implementation. You're looking at total cost of ownership and licenses, and those are some of the reasons a lot of you may have chosen Zoho as well. So let's dive deeper. So you've told us a little bit about the problem. You've told us about the software that you found. Now let's talk about the core features. So we're here in the sales track. We're all trying to learn some of the features in the CRM that we can take advantage of. Can you name some of the core features that really made a difference in your company?
Well, and me coming on after the fact, so they made a management decision about Zoho and then hired the dev team. They didn't hire a dev team to help make a decision about Zoho. So I came on board to help figure out how Zoho was gonna get used. And so we needed to interpret what was actually needed by the company initially, and I think upper management and CEOs often get, um, the idea that everything should be central,
Mhm.
and I think at the end of the day, what they really needed was just eye candy. They just needed data to be central, and then we could work on processes and
Okay.
implementing that. So frankly, the agility of Zoho, the flexibility to kind of add on things as needed was really what really became the key, so that we could kind of figure out first how to get all the data in, which became Zoho Analytics, which was a huge win right out of the gate, and then start picking off processes. And one of the other things about our company that makes it special is how it actually markets and sells. That's a huge component to our business model. And so walking through that process as well and starting to onboard those into Zoho, became really crucial for us.
Absolutely. So, the with Zoho, there are so many different entry points into our ecosystem. Some of you may have started with CRM, some may have started with projects, some may have started with Zoho Mail, and you guys started with Zoho Analytics, right? So the first and most important thing is the value of your data in your business. If you can't get any insight from your data, you have no idea how to scale or how to grow. So rather than putting in software immediately, it was let's first study the data, because in order to make a decision nowadays there's intuition, but there's also the drive of using data to make that decision. So that was step number one, absolutely. And then when you jumped into the CRM, you had talked to me about your consultation or intake process as being one of those core things that you were looking to standardize. What parts of the CRM did you implement in order to make that a more standard approach?
Yeah, our process, I'm sure, is every sales process, I'm sure, has something unique about it.
Yes.
Ours is unique in that it's a sort of a three-step process. We have the lead gen side, and a lot of these processes we're still trying to figure out how to integrate into Zoho. But we have the lead generation side, which is mostly web-based technologies and social, networking, all those kinds of things. Then we have what we call sets, where people are just encouraged to come in for a consultation, which is that third step. That consultation is really where the important things happen, because they're coming into the practice for medical clearance, to learn about financing options. That's where that's where they make that decision that they wanna change their smile, change their life, so they're sitting with an actual consultant in the practice. That became a big hole because there was no software or any technology around it other than some Google Sheets and some written templates about how to walk through that process. And so that became a really low-hanging fruit for us to say, "All right, let's take this whole consulting process and build a module for it, and let's regulate," because every location was doing it differently as well. Like, we didn't have control over the how they were actually doing it.
Yep. Yep.
And so we brought that in as a custom module and then slammed a blueprint on it, which was really cool for us because not only did it regulate the consulting process, but it actually helped us think through it and define it as we went. So it's like
Absolutely.
accomplishing two things at the same time for us. Like, what do they actually do? Well, let's put a blueprint up and let's walk through it. And now that blueprint actually enforces it at the same time.
Exactly, exactly.
So it was a
Keep
beautiful
compliant.
process for us to implement that whole consultation.
Yeah. So in most businesses that we observe, you're scaling very quickly, which is a great thing. And then at some point you decide that I have to standardize this or I can't grow the business any longer. It's hard to train people. People start using simple tools like spreadsheets to get things done because their software is not something they can easily adopt. They're not able to even use it. A lot of users are scared of using CRM systems because it just looks like a big management tool. And so they stand up going back to what I call old school approach, emails and handwriting notes or spreadsheets. So the blueprint, I'm glad you brought that up. So the blueprint is a way to keep you compliant, right? Or standardize the process so that everyone that comes on board will do the same thing. That's great for managers. How is that great for the end users? Well, the CRM tells you what to do. You can design buttons without any code. You can label the buttons in the CRM so when you open a record, you click on that button, it then tells you what to do. So a lot of that manual work and even the thinking is left out. We implemented Blueprint in our sales team as well. The team just opens any record and starts the process, right? And that's different from automation. So automation, the if this then that, is a part of the process. Once you design the process, you can then decide what is automated off of those buttons. But the initial thing is setting up that process, right? So as Parl's company grows, as they add new locations, that consult process is the same across the board. And the new team doesn't have to relearn it. They simply just log in, click on the buttons in the blueprint, and then they're able to move forward. It will tell you what to do, what fields are needed, what notes are added, and then you can, of course, trigger automations. And then it goes back to his initial statement on data. It actually allows all of those gaps in your data to be filled in because everyone is following the same process. The fields are getting validated, and it's happening in the right order as well. So that's what keeps you compliant. And the other thing you mentioned is custom modules. We highly, highly, highly recommend looking at this feature in our product. Every business is unique, so every business will have custom data objects, right? And what we did recently was we moved that feature all the way to the standard edition. So it doesn't matter what version of CRM you're on anymore, you have access to this feature because we understand everyone has a need for this. So think about, things outside the box from installations to repairs, services, contracts, their consultation visits. These are all custom data objects. They won't fit into leads, contacts, deals, but now you can easily make a module and then you can tie the blueprint to that as well. That allows you to build that unique business solution that you are looking for and without any code as well. I also want to kind of dive in a little further into the blueprint. The blueprint has a lot of other features because processes aren't straightforward. Sometimes things happen in parallel. Sometimes things have to loop around. Not everything is sequential. Sometimes things are time-based as well. So this is why it keeps you very compliant. You can do things in the right order and timely so that things don't get delayed. And I can see why that made a huge difference for y'all as you grew, just to be able to map this out. Now on this screen, you can see some of those buttons. I've put an arrow on there so you can see that you can even color code the buttons. On this screen here, you're also looking at a very unique layout of the CRM, which we call the canvas. So tell me a little bit about this design. How does this design help your end users kind of adopt the system?
Yeah, for us, we recognized pretty rapidly that we had a set of information that was really more relevant to administration or other user types in the company that needed to be attached to a consult that could be updated either from workflows or as part of the blueprint process that the consultant didn't actually even need to see.
Right.
And so we wanted to make sure the canvas view gave us the opportunity to make that process tight so that the consultant only sees what he needs to see and is aware of what he needs to update in the process while everything else could be hidden but still updated and have that valuable information for us administratively.
Absolutely. I liked how you mentioned user types, right? So usually you kind of think there's admins and there's standard users, but within those standard users, you also have different types of people accessing the system. They shouldn't all have to see the same list of all of those data fields. And so there's two ways you can approach this. One, you can hide irrelevant data to that user profile. But if you really want to take it a step further to really fix the problem of user adoption, you design the UI around what makes them comfortable. You can color code, you can make really nice, you can choose your font, you can change the personalized design. It doesn't feel then again like a CRM. It feels like something that you want to see and look at every single day. And I know a lot of people love this feature because it just makes things easier. Um, Next, I want to talk about the bookings of the consultation process. You mentioned there was two problems, right? There's bookings and then there's the consultation process. So let's take it back a little bit further. The bookings problem, right? It was a very unique challenge for you guys. Can you describe what the challenge was?
Yeah, so we needed to be able to see a full calendar and manage that calendar more from a dental practice perspective. And if you've ever been in a dental practice, they live in a calendar more like what the calendar would be on the mail side of things. But we needed it to be a CRM calendar
Mhm.
because it's going to be attached to leads and contacts for us. That's patients. And so we basically took the idea of a widget, and this is my favorite part because I'm a nerd and I helped develop most of this tool. But we took JavaScript as the language of our platform of choice, and took that JavaScript and programmed this calendar using a lot of JavaScript out there, open source tools and things to build this calendar. And behind the scenes, we use the Zoho JavaScript SDK.
Mhm.
That all gets really nerdy, but we were able to basically build our own custom tool using the SDK to grab data from the CRM, the lead module primarily, and then build this calendar so that we could actually see all the appointments for any location. There's a selector there at the top that lets you select which location you want to see and see all the consultations that are scheduled on the calendar or set them. You can see some people on the right in an unscheduled status. So you could call that person and schedule them and just drag them and drop them onto the calendar. And that all these little features, none of which really existed in the booking
Right.
part of the product
Right.
or any other product that we could see in Zoho. And so we saw the ability to just make our own custom tool and install it as a widget and use CRM data to put in it.
Absolutely. So, if you're not familiar with the widgets are embeddable components into the CRM. When we're faced with a challenge that's very unique to his business, the first thing he's going to look at is, can I use Zoho bookings? Can I use the CRM bookings? We have two features just out of the box, and you're going to have this issue: build versus buy. Right. So, can you buy another app off the market, or do I have to build something custom? And then there's also a little bit of in between, which is where the widgets can come in. So you do have to go with a third party application, but now you're going into this problem of now everyone has to navigate to different apps and different tabs. So how can I bring that all in one place? And that's where the JavaScript SDK can come into play. You can take that application and embed it into the custom module. Once it's embedded, that data, the data can be natively put into the CRM. Then you can trigger workflows and the blueprint and reports, because now that third party data not only is being pushed to the CRM, it resides in the CRM. So now they can interact with that other app within a custom module. And if you go to our marketplace, you will see you have the ability to kind of install extensions. These are the types of extensions we offer. They're embeddable widgets, and so you'll see that capability is there out of the box on the marketplace. But if you want to build your own, then JavaScript is the way to get this in there. I do encourage exploring this because it does make your CRM continue to be that central system of record versus, again, bouncing from other apps. You can embed our own Zoho apps as widgets, but also these third-party tools. And so if you have this build versus buy problem, if you can't find it on Zoho, try the custom approach. And then after that, see if you can get a developer to embed it into the CRM so it just becomes part of the native day-to-day flow and not having, again, to bounce around from apps. Once that happens, we lose a little bit of efficiency and productivity because we lose seconds of time. And then as we hire and scale, people can get confused, so it just stays all in one system. So this is an example of a custom widget. As he described using JavaScript, you can design this on your own. It does not have to look like this. It can look like the exact interface that you feel your users will be comfortable in front of, and then they can navigate there and begin their work. We talked about Zoholics at the very beginning. Can you tell me a little bit about, when you open up Zoho what are some of the reports you're looking at to analyze all of this data that's now being able to be processed very cleanly into your system?
Um, I don't I don't use I became the data guy to get data into it. And then there's some other folks that design the reports and stuff. and that we help with the queries and make sure
Yep.
that they're interpreting the data properly. It's kind of funny because the reports and things are used by upper management, and that's their eye candy, and once they had that, they almost didn't care what processes lived in Zoho, honestly. But for us as the end users that needed to do the day-to-day processes, we still want them central as possible because I don't wanna move data from 4 different places if I can help
Exactly.
it. But I know that they have a bunch of reports where they're obviously looking at almost real time, as close to real time as we can get, sales data and information through those 3 processes, like how many leads were we getting, how many sets were made, how many consultations did we have, and how many went to the closing stage, right, and
Yep.
financing. So they're looking at those numbers in closer to real time than they've ever seen them and more accurate than they've ever seen them, and they are able to make day-to-day decisions, about things that cost us millions of dollars, um, and, a decision can cost a couple 100 grand more, or a couple 100 grand less because of the data they're looking at in analytics.
Yeah. I like how you said eye candy. That's what the executives want in the end is the most beautiful dashboard with easy to read KPIs and being able to make these decisions. Now with Zoho Analytics, you've taken on the role of more of the data analyst or developer. You can also you can think of Zoho Analytics as for three types of users: data analysts, data scientists, and then of course end users. It could be your sales team, could be the executives. If for data science, we have some features that allow you to add machine learning algorithms to actually build off of your data and do prediction analysis. You can do forecasting. And then on the data analyst side, you can bring in data from multiple sources and join the right types of data together using either SQL or no code approaches and design those databases in the right structure and then being able to visualize off of that structure. So when you're looking at applications like this, in order to get to that eye candy, make sure you have the right people in place to analyze the data and then to build off of it so that the executives can log in, and they don't want to log into the CRM. They don't want to log into Zodesk. They want to log into their really really nice dashboard, right? That is kind of like our end goal. Um, I mentioned that Nuvia uses up to 20 different Zoho applications. They have a very unique implementation for Zodesk. Tell me how you're using Zodesk internally.
Yeah, Zoho desks, because you can imagine if we have over 40 locations, we have a lot of various issues that can occur in various locations. And so we use Desk for all the internal use to let people submit those issues to a central team. We do tie that into Zoho projects as well, so that if something is not just a quick fix bug, maybe it's a development request feature, perhaps more that they're asking for, we can easily translate that into a Zoho project where we can continue to develop on Zoho to fix it or give them what they need. So in conjunction with Zoho projects, we use Desk really heavily to manage those day-to-day requests that are coming in pretty big volume sometimes.
Yeah, so normally, Zohodesk may be positioned as a customer help desk portal, but they're using it internally for tickets. So maybe in some of your businesses where you have multiple locations, or you're taking on the role of an IT administrator, and you need to get tickets specifically about the in this case, the Zoho solution, you can use Zohodesk even for internal ticketing as well. And then you mentioned Zoho Projects. Zoho Projects, I know y'all are using in managing rollouts for new locations, and that saved you a lot of time as well, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we use it for internal IT support, and then a whole 'nother team reached out and said, "Hey, can we use projects for this?" And it was less of a sort of an agile system and more of just a waterfall thing that they needed, and projects is flexible enough to kinda give you either environment. They built in this waterfall system that allows them to train all the new staff for a new location, which is pretty complex because of travel and time and scheduling and everything else, and they've been able to save thousands of dollars with every new build out because of
Excellent.
that.
So that's enabling y'all to scale faster as well,
That's
right?
right.
Yeah. Excellent. Before we wrap up, I'm gonna do a quick demo on some of these features, but before we wrap up, can you tell me one other unique solution that Zoho enabled?
Yeah, one of the other big wins for us and we didn't even realize it going into it, because I came in after the fact and we're like, "Where can we get wins out of the system?" And one of the things that happened really early on was recognizing the fact that we had this huge Slack account with hundreds of users in it. I'm like, well, click seems like a pretty natural transition. Like, let's figure out what all that means. And when we dug into it, we actually discovered that some of our analytics processes were actually grabbing chats from Slack and putting that information into a spreadsheet to get sales numbers because they had all the sales guys reporting their wins in Slack. That was one of our analytics methodologies. And so we had all these really weird idiosyncrasies we had to figure out how to translate into Click. So we used a bot and some API hits from the CRM to kind of mimic some of those sales wins. And we were able to throw alerts out there when certain things happen in the CRM, and we got everybody migrated to Click. And that was a huge win for us because that was all covered by the same cost, and we removed that cost of Slack.
Right.
And we still gave them their sort of eye candy in Click, thinking that they were seeing the numbers, but the numbers are all now in analytics.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah, that's great. So, I like that way of thought because, traditionally you have chat tools that's just your one or two-way communication in your company, but you don't think about the bots. And Click is a platform that allows you to build bots, and for CRM notifications specifically, it's a built-in workflow where you can trigger a Click message for a sales win, for example. When we use that internally as well, when we have a certain deal or a support ticket that needs attention, it uses the Click bot notifications to send internally to our teams as well. Because a lot of the times, people aren't reading email as much these days. They're on their chat platform. So this way you're able to get in front of them faster without, again, having to navigate to all these different apps. All right. Thank you, Paul, for joining me on stage. Appreciate your insight and sharing of some of these core capabilities. One of the things he mentioned was the blueprint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump on my laptop and walk you through how to configure a blueprint for the next 15 to 20 minutes. As we continue, some of the stuff that Paul mentioned, I want to make it just very clear so you're able to connect what solutions he mentioned to the features, right? So that when you're looking through the product or on our website, what actual features did he use? So one, custom module. Remember, extend your system for any unique capabilities or objects that you need to track. We encourage you to make a custom module. There's no code required. You just drag and drop the fields. Blueprint. Blueprint is our process management system. Again, a drag and drop approach. And I'm gonna show you this in the demo and how you can create any business process in the CRM itself. Once you have a process, you can then think about making it more efficient by adding workflow rules. We showed you a unique user interface. So we have a feature called Canvas that has some templates, but allows you to create your own interface so that people adopt the system. And we see this in the industry, just in general, that the CRM adoption rates are low because of the interface. People want to see something that's pleasant, something that they're comfortable with. So why don't you give them that experience? You don't have to standardize the canvas to everybody. You can do it just for the sales team and only give them the data they need to see in the right format. And then you can trigger automations off of that as well. On the blueprint, you can create buttons, but then you may have other capabilities that need to trigger as well, and it doesn't make sense through a workflow automation or a module. You can create your own buttons, and some of these buttons can allow you to trigger URLs or API calls, so that again everything stays in one system. And then lastly, you saw his bookings calendar that he designed, and he used the embeddable component, which we call widgets. So the blueprint, when it's all set and ready, basically just looks like a flow chart. So for your admin, it's easy to build because you're just building a flow chart, something that all of us have done. And when you have situations in which you get a new administrator or you just need to train a new user, because it's standardized, that one, the new administrator doesn't have to wonder how did you implement the system. I can visually see it. And then two, when you get a new user, the system is already telling them what to do. The training becomes less and less. So let's jump over into the CRM. I'm here on the leads module, so I'm just going to click on setup, and then I'm go to the process management area, and you'll see here, and it's just it says blueprint, right? So once we're in this area, and if you're maybe using this for the first time, you will see that there are some pre-made blueprints in the system. So if you want to see what one looks like, there is one already out of the box. And let's describe what's going on here first. So there's two colors, right? There's white and there's blue. So white is what we consider states of your trend of your process. So process, remember, is a series of steps that is repeatable. So those steps in development terms are called states. So when you, let's say, even when you order food at a restaurant, your order goes through different states, right? There's the order placed, the order is cooked, the order is delivered, the order is paid. Those are four different states that that object goes through. So in CRM world, we are usually focused on things like leads or deals. Those all go through different states. Sometimes we call them statuses, sometimes we call them stages, but these are called states, okay? So you have a field, it will likely have 4 or 5 different options. Those are the states that you've likely already established, right? That's your process. Now, to get from one state to the other, if you don't have something like a blueprint, you are basically relying on the trust of everybody on your team to update the right fields, send the right email, update the right task, put in the right note, and you don't have compliance. And so what this allows you to do is from one state to the other, have an input and an output. So what is the input needed to reach the state? What do I need to do to get the right output to move to the next state so people can't basically hop around in the system? That's where your process efficiency comes into play. Once that's happening, one, again, it's easier for people to use, but two, you start getting new reports that you've never seen before, process reports. The CRM will tell you where things are held up, how long it takes on average to get a deal completed, which even state takes the longest to move to. Maybe you can hyper focus on that particular area and maybe add more automation to that space because you know exactly where it's hanging up. Okay, so let's move out of this pre-made one. And like I said, we were going to make a blueprint. So we're going to make one for the deals module. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit because we're all in the sales track. So let's focus on sales process. So I'm just going to call it test. And you can pick any modules. As I mentioned, making custom modules makes these, it allows you to standardize every single process. You can see you can have any of these modules, whatever process you need to standardize, go ahead and choose that one. And then if you are choosing multiple layouts, otherwise we'll stick to the standard layout. Now let's go back to what I said about states, right? So states are these pieces of your process that you need to label so that if someone else looked at that process from that state, they're able to know, hey, this is where this thing is right now, right? So keep it as super simple. So you have to create a field in order to label the states. If you have a drop-down field already, it will auto-identify that drop-down field for you, and you can easily pick it off the menu. So if you haven't designed that field just yet, especially in a custom module, go ahead and design that field. Then you have one more layer of thought. Do you want to apply this to every record or only certain records? So you can filter this out just like you do with a report or a view, and you can pick another field and filter out that, hey, this blueprint is not for every deal, but only deals worth $10,000 or more, something like that. So if you don't have any criteria, you can, of course, skip over that. I'm going to click on advanced configuration here as well, so you can see what is the difference between a continuous or a standard blueprint. So continuous blueprints are best for a B2C environment or a call center where an object, in this case a deal or a lead or a contact, has to go through the entire process at once. You cannot, in the B2B world, we're working with multiple deals and leads at the same time. So maybe one goes to proposal, one is still in negotiation, one is in initial discovery mode, and so they're all happening at different times. But in some cases, that entire process has to happen from beginning to end. And you don't want that salesperson or the user to jump into another record. If they do, it will reset the process. So usually that's why we've put in here, call agents and call centers are a good use of the continuous blueprint. So that's why you have that option. Now in our example, we're not going to do that, but you can see you can switch it on and off right here. Once we go into the next page, we're basically just having to drag and drop our states. Because I chose the deal stage field, my states are my deal stages, right? So I simply just take the first one and I can put it over here and it adds it to the flow chart. So what I'm gonna do for this example, I'm just gonna add a few in a line so you can see how I'm going to create these transitions between these states. So I'm gonna add closed won and I'll add closed lost, and won't use all of them just for simplicity's sake. Okay, and even then, if you had forgotten to make it continuous, you have an option here as well. Now, all we do is we take our mouse and we drag and drop a line, and that creates our transition point. Remember the input and output. So we're on the first state here, and in order to get to the next state, we can simply click on the transition and figure out how are we going to get from state 1 to state 2. And you can also color code the buttons just to make things easier. So it gives you a few options, right? So you have a regular transition, but then you have parallel or automatic. Let's go through all three. So regular transition, which we will start with first, I'm just going to say, so imagine this is a button. So to go from qualification to value proposition, the button should sound like an action item, right? Rather than, you don't want to call it value proposition, people won't be able to interpret it really well. So think of it, it's an action button, just like convert, right? So you want to, I would always recommend putting a verb there. So qualify to value prop, what are we going to do, right? So let's say we want to, in order to get from qualification to value proposition, let's say begin discovery. Okay. So that way it looks like a button that I'd want to press because it's going to let me do something. Now, if I go ahead and save that, now I can go to the input output criteria. In order for this button, so remember, this value proposition and qualification is not the button. The button is the begin discovery. How does that button appear? Remember, there's an input and an output. So what is the input? Well, I just want it to show up on every single deal, so I'm not going to have any input. Simply, as soon as the deal goes into the first stage, the button appears. But in order to get to the next button or to the next state, I'm going to have certain items that are going to keep us in compliance or standardize a process. So generally speaking, most people are going to have some fields they need to fill in. They're going to have some items like tasks or meetings they need to schedule. And so those are going to be the most common items. Now, generally speaking, when you go from one stage to the other, you scroll down on the page, you find the right fields, you fill them in. Some are mandatory, some are not. But what this helps with is that just appears at the top of the page. They don't have to scroll down and find the fields. You can simply say add field, and then they are going to be able to just see right there at the top of the screen, I need to go ahead and fill out these fields. So let's say we have to fill out the amount, and we can make that mandatory or optional. And that allows you to first make sure you have all the right data points so that if you're running a report on your pipeline, you're not saying, hey, well, here's my pipeline report, but you three forgot to put in the expected amount of the deal. Now it's mandatory. Plus, on top of that, you can add the validation rules as well. So they can't put 0 or they can't put XYZ and try to skip over it. You can make sure it's validated to a number and a certain number as well. So we allow you to make sure, again, very clean process. So that is one of the more simpler ones. If you want to tag records, this allows you to auto tag. And then there are things outside of kind of the I guess I say the regular CRM features, right? So besides fields and tasks and meetings, you can do custom checklists. Maybe they have to go run and do something in another system, or maybe have a list of things to do that are just outside of the CRM. But they need to be reminded that, hey, did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? So it's like a widget, but it turns into a simple checklist for them. Then, as Paul showed his widget, you can actually embed the widget into the blueprint. This way, whatever custom object that you've made with a custom UI, that also shows up in your process. So again, they're not leaving the blueprint, bouncing around to the module, adding the data, and then coming back to that blueprint. Kiosk is a feature we have yet to talk about today. It will be talked about later today in the track. It's basically considered, I'd say, like a no-code or low-code widget. So if you don't have the skills or a developer to do some of this unique design with JavaScript, there are ways to get some of this done using a builder, which we call the kiosk. So they are related to each other. So if you've kind of not been able to kind of distinguish what these two are, think of a kiosk as a low-code or no-code widget for those who don't know JavaScript or don't need to worry too much about custom design. Just want to get things done and design a kiosk around it. So that's all of the stuff that can happen during. And then lastly, our next session after lunch will be automation. So you can basically tie your automation rules together. That's another reason people will use blueprints. You have these situations where you want to send an email to a contact. You want to send a reminder. You want to let them know their contract is expiring. Maybe you want to send them a series of emails on a trial. Whatever it is, those are workflow rules. But those workflow rules need to be chained together. So the blueprint actually allows you to do that chain concept because in here, your existing workflow rules can be added to these different transition points, and then they're all part of the same process. So now you know they're all going to execute timely because they're going to follow this process. So if you run into that issue of, I wish I could chain all these workflow rules together because you've already built some automation, this is another way to handle that is through the blueprint itself. All right, let's go back to the options for the transition, right? So I'm going to draw a few more lines real quick. And I'm going to show you a common transition. And we're going to draw a line to close loss, right? Now, in the real world, is a deal going to close lost only when you get to the negotiation phase? No, it could close lost at any point. So we call this a common transition. Okay, that means this button shows up every single time. So let's go ahead and create this button. Deal is lost, right? And now in this case, we want that to be common. So what it's going to do is automatically draws lines everywhere for you, but you don't see them because then, the flow chart won't look so visually appealing because you see so many lines. So it hides them for you, but at the same time, it marks it with the letter C, so you know this is a common transition. That means in the record, even if I'm at qualification, I will now see two buttons. Begin discovery, deal is lost. So maybe from the first call, someone just said, no, I'm not interested. At least you can just move that record out of the blueprint immediately. So that's one case. The other case to solve is when things can have to happen in parallel or things have to happen automatically. Okay, so let's talk about these two. So a parallel transition. So there are multiple paths to take in order to get to the next state. It doesn't matter what order they happen in, but there are three things that need to be done. So it goes beyond a checklist because a checklist is just simply checking an item off. Each one of these has their own list of actions that need to be done. Maybe they're not all on the sales rep to do. Maybe there are other teams that need to do it. There are 2-3 different things that need to be done in order to move to that next step. So we allow for parallel transitions because, again, the real world processes aren't just always from A to B. There are 3 things, and then you can get to B. So that's what parallel transitions are able to be used for. Automatic transitions. Some things have an SLA, right? So let's say we are in the food industry and we need to ship out fresh items, right? Like HelloFresh. Now those items have a shelf life. If they're not shipped out within 2 days, then that's it. That item is expired. We need to get a new item from the warehouse, right? So that's what the automatic transition is for, is to keep you up to date on those SLAs. So that way, if something has not moved along from one state to the other, it automatically goes ahead and does it for you. For example, in this case, to alert the warehouse team to put together the package for delivery because someone forgot to move it to the next transition. That way, again, it keeps you compliant. And of course, it makes sure that things like expired goods reach the customer on time. So that's what those two options are. So with the blueprint transitions, going from step A to step B, you can go linear, you can go parallel, and then you can also add an SLA. And then lastly, if that particular item can be reached from any other state, then you just call it a common transition, and it adds all the rest of the lines for you. Once you have the blueprint live, you can publish it, and you'll see it into the system. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create the rest of these transitions. So we're going to go from proposal to negotiation. So I'm just going to add negotiate with client. I'm going to go ahead and put here, send proposal. And then from here, I'm going to go ahead and add one more. Let's close the deal. And for the sake of the demo, let me go ahead and change this color to red so we can see some color coding. And put here, send proposal. Hit save. And then, of course, I want to show you a few of the features. So we're going to go to during. We've added amount as mandatory. Let's go ahead and add a checklist so you can see what that looks like. I'm just going to call it checklist, and we'll do 1, 2, and 3. Go ahead and add that. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to associated items. I'm going to go ahead and make sure we add a note. Okay. And then lastly, I'm going to add a message. And I'm just going to put good job. Okay. Now, you're going to see all of this happen in that one item, which is the begin discovery. Okay. So we've added everything for during, and then if we want to, we can add after. So I'm going to go ahead and just add a task. I'm just going to call it to do item and go ahead and say it's due in 3 days. Okay, so we've added something after, we've added something during. I'm not going to add anything before just to make it simple. And we're going to go ahead and publish the blueprint. Oh, I did not have all our transitions here. Let's go ahead and hit send proposal. Okay, and then I'm going to put here close deal. Okay, now everything's saved. Let's go ahead and publish. Now remember, the only way for this to work, this test blueprint, is if we have a deal in qualification. So we're going to go to our modules. We're going to go to deals, and I can go ahead and find or create a deal. So let's quickly create one. We'll call this Zoholics deal. and we can add an account. We can put in a closing date. These are just my regular mandatory fields. Okay. Blueprint is ready to go. Okay. So within the last 15 minutes, we've created a process, right? And I color coded it to show you that it was that I can add these two buttons. The reason we made those buttons as action items is easy for the end user to interpret. So I can either begin the discovery or I just lose the deal. If there are more options and you kind of want to see the path ahead, it has a little bit of a pop-up just to tell you that, hey, if I go to begin discovery, it will take me to value prop, or in this case, it will take me to close loss, just for a little bit of insight. If I begin discovery, now all the items that I had put into the blueprint are available here for me to fill in. So the amount is mandatory, so I go ahead and fill that in. You can see my little message there, good job, in the corner. And then I can add a note. Now let's go ahead and just hit save. Right, so it says checklist cannot be empty. So I go ahead and do one. Again, it makes sure I get this done, and now I'm able to move, and immediately takes us to the next part of the process. Now, I didn't add any other items to any of the transitions, so I simply now can just click, and it takes me over, and we can just say deal is lost, and that takes us all the way to the end. And now we're out of the blueprint. Notice that record is out of the blueprint. Okay. Now, if you have, let's go create one more deal. We're going to call this, let's just call it Zoho test. I'm going to link it to another record. We'll put $5,000 in this case, closing date, stage, and go ahead and save it. Okay, so we have the begin discovery. Now notice the amount is already there in this case. Our checklist, let's just say one is done. Okay, so you can see here, if I zoom in, it tells you that some of the work is done, but not all of the work is ready, right? So it gives you an idea that I only clicked one part of the checklist. There's still some more things that need to be done. Another thing that is cool is that if you have a lot of these things going on at the same time, this module called My Jobs will actually start to populate, and your end user can actually just go to this module instead of going to leads or deals and just say, oh, what do I have to do today? And here are all of my deals. And I can just click the button from here, and I can just do my work from this module. So you're now not having to hop around all over the CRM, looking at your stages, your pipeline, your views, your modules. Just go to My Jobs and start clicking on these buttons, and you can actually just work right out of here. So a lot of efficiency can be produced here with this blueprint. You can see in this My Jobs module, there are a few other things like approvals, which you can tie approvals to blueprints as well. But I just wanted to show you that this is just another place that you can work out of the CRM once the blueprint is activated. Then I'll wrap up. This last screen here is actually from the reporting area of the blueprint. So one of the things that we talked about was just designing the process, but insight into that process is also very important. How do you know it's efficient? How do you know where things are hanging up? How do you know how many records are in the blueprint? And you'll see this same set of reports is actually from our user guide itself. But what it's showing you is I can now look at my process and see where all the records are, how long they're taking to move from each state to the other, which I think is the most important thing, which is on the top right. So you can see here, between discount approved to decision made, we are spending a lot more time. Maybe this is something the manager can investigate to see where are we hanging up, where can we improve, where can we speed this up, even interviewing the team. Why is this particular thing taking longer than it should be? And that way you can get some efficiency off of your process.